Have you ever noticed how different it feels to work on something challenging with someone else?
Oh, yeah.
Like when you're moving a heavy piece of furniture,
Yeah.
or maybe you're trying to solve some complex problem together.
Uh-huh.
It's not just that it's easier with two people,
Right.
it's that there's this feeling of a shared we
Yeah.
in the process.
Yeah, there's something different going on there.
Exactly. And philosophers have been trying to figure out what that difference is for a long time.
Yeah, it's actually a big topic in philosophy of action.
Really?
Absolutely. We're not just talking about teamwork or efficiency here.
Right.
We're diving into the deep philosophical question. What does it even mean to act together?
Wow, that's a lot deeper than I was thinking.
It gets even more interesting when you realize this isn't just some abstract philosophical puzzle.
Oh.
This idea of shared agency, as it's called, pops up everywhere.
Like where?
Well, think about it. Politics, social science, economics, ethics, law,
Yeah.
even epistemology and psychology. It touches on so many different areas.
So it's kind of a big deal then.
Oh, it's a huge deal. And in this deep dive, we're going to try to unpack it.
Sounds good.
We'll look at what philosophers have said about shared agency,
Okay.
and we'll explore whether it can be explained purely in terms of individual actions.
Or whether there's something more to it.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics. How do we even distinguish a shared activity from a bunch of individuals acting on their own?
Good question.
Searle, a famous philosopher, gives this great example. Imagine you're in a park,
Okay.
and suddenly it starts raining.
Uh-oh.
Everyone runs for cover.
Right, naturally. To the same shelter.
Right, to the same shelter. Now, compare that to a group of dancers performing in the same park.
Okay.
They're all moving together in a synchronized way.
Uh-huh.
From a purely outside perspective, both groups might look similar.
They're all just moving their bodies, right?
Exactly. But Searle argues that there's a fundamental difference between the two.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
He says the difference isn't in what we see, but in the participants' intentions.
The intention.
Yeah. The picnickers are each running to avoid getting wet.
Makes sense. Each with their own intention.
Right. Each with their own individual intention to stay dry.
But the dancers.
The dancers are moving together as part of a shared, coordinated performance.
So it's like they have a collective goal.
Exactly. And this is where Searle introduces this idea of a we intention.
A we intention. That sounds interesting.
It's like, in addition to their individual intentions, they also have this shared intention.
Like we are performing this dance together.
Precisely. And this we intention is what makes it a genuine shared activity.
So for Searle, shared action isn't just I do this, you do that. It's we do this together.
Exactly. But not all philosophers agree with Searle right away.
Really? Why not?
Well, some philosophers who are inspired by Anscombe and Wittgenstein think we should look at actions first.
Instead of intention.
Yeah. They believe we figure out intentions by observing what people do.
So you see the dancers moving in sync, and then you infer their shared intention.
Precisely. Thinkers like Stoutland and Lawrence have applied this kind of thinking to shared agency.
Okay, so that's one alternative to Searle. Are there others?
Oh, yeah. Think about those unintentional but collective outcomes, like environmental damage.
I see what you mean. No one intends to cause environmental damage.
Right. But we still do it collectively through our individual actions.
And sometimes, maybe, we're not even aware of how our actions contribute.
That's the point. It makes us question whether shared agency always requires a conscious we intention.
Yeah, that example really makes you think, like, are we truly acting together if we're not aware of the shared outcome?
That's a really tough question. Maybe the we part emerges from the consequences of our actions.
Rather than a prior conscious intention?
Exactly. So it's not as straightforward as it might seem at first.
Okay, so we've got these challenges to Searle's idea, but let's say, for now, that we agree intention is important.
Okay.
What does that mean for this we intention? Is it like there's a group mind that has its own intentions?
That's the classic problem of the group mind. It's a tempting idea, but also very tricky.
Yeah, it sounds a little mystical to me.
It is. And Searle, like most philosophers today, is pretty skeptical of it.
Why is that?
Well, for one thing, it creates a lot of extra minds running around.
I guess every group would have its own mind then.
Exactly. And Searle points out that just because you're part of a group doesn't mean you share all its goals.
It's like being a citizen of a country.
Yeah.
You might not agree with everything your government does.
Exactly. So we need to focus on the intentions of the individuals involved.
So how do we make sense of the we if we're not talking about a group mind?
That's where the intention thesis comes in.
Okay, tell me about that.
The intention thesis says that each person in a shared activity has a special kind of intention.
What kind of intention?
It's called a participatory intention. This intention connects the individual to the shared activity.
So it's their individual commitment to the we.
Exactly. It's what sets their action apart from when they're acting alone, but then the debate gets even more interesting.
How so?
Well, philosophers want to know, what exactly is this participatory intention?
I see. Like, what does it mean for an individual to have a we intention?
Right. And can we understand it just in terms of normal individual intentions and beliefs?
Oh, so like break it down into simpler parts.
Exactly. That's what Tuomela and Miller try to do.
Okay, what's their take on it?
They argue that a participatory intention has three main components.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, you intend to do your part in the shared activity.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, you believe that the activity can be successfully completed.
So you're optimistic about the we succeeding.
Right. And third, you believe that everyone else also believes it can be done.
So a shared belief in the possibility of success.
Exactly. It's like a layered set of beliefs and intentions.
It sounds plausible, but I bet there are problems.
You know it. Searle comes along with a pretty compelling objection.
Oh, what does he say?
He says, imagine a bunch of business school graduates. They all believe in the invisible hand of the market.
You mean they believe that pursuing self-interest leads to the common good?
Right. So each graduate intends to get rich, thinking it'll benefit society in the long run.
Okay, I'm following.
And they believe everyone else thinks the same way, and that the economic conditions are right for it to work.
So they fit the three conditions you mentioned, right?
Exactly. But Searle says, would we really say they're engaged in a shared activity of helping humanity?
I don't think so. They're just out for themselves.
Right. They're not cooperating or working together towards that goal.
It's just a side effect of their individual actions.
Exactly. And Searle's point is that you can't just add a cooperative clause to their intentions.
Because that would assume they already have a shared activity, which is what we're trying to explain.
Precisely. It's like saying, I intend to do my part in our project. You're already assuming there is an hour.
Okay, so how does Searle address this then?
Searle thinks this we intention is a basic, fundamental kind of intention.
So it's not built up from other intentions or beliefs.
Right. It's a primitive intention. It can't be broken down further.
Interesting. So it's a we intention from the start?
Exactly. You can have an intention like, we are going for a walk, even if you're alone.
So even if no one else is actually joining you on the walk?
Yeah, the intention itself is still a we intention in its content.
That's pretty wild. So it doesn't depend on what's going on in other people's minds?
Nope. Searle's pushing back against this idea that our thoughts are always determined by social context.
Okay, so we've got these different views on what a participatory intention is. But even if we accept that, how do these intentions have to connect for us to have a shared intention and a collective action?
That's the million-dollar question. Just having a bunch of we intentions floating around isn't enough.
I mean, if I think we're going to the museum and you think we're going to the museum, but we have different museums in mind.
Yeah, or if one of us is thinking of driving and the other is thinking of taking the subway.
Right. Then we don't really have a shared intention, even if the words are the same.
Exactly. Searle doesn't really dive into the details of how these intentions connect.
So who does?
Bratman. He's another big name in this area.
Okay, what's Bratman's take?
Bratman's got this very influential theory where he tries to explain shared activity in terms of how individual intentions relate to each other. He calls it an interpersonal structure of related intentions.
Sounds complicated.
It's not too bad once you break it down. Basically, he sees it as a way for people to coordinate their actions and plans.
Okay, that makes sense. Coordination is key for any shared activity.
Absolutely. And he also thinks it helps explain how we can do things like planning and bargaining together.
So shared intentions help lay the groundwork for those more complex interactions.
Precisely. For Bratman, the individual intention, our participatory intention, takes the form of, I intend that we J.
I intend that we J. What's J?
J stands for the shared activity, whatever it might be. But Bratman doesn't stop there.
He goes further.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He says there are certain conditions that need to be met for these individual intentions to form a real shared intention.
Like rules for how the intentions have to fit together.
Exactly. One of the key conditions has to do with our individual plans.
Our plans, like how we're going to contribute to the shared activity.
You got it. He calls it the meshing of sub-plans. Think about it. If we both intend to paint a house together,
Okay.
But I'm planning to paint it yellow, and you're planning to paint it blue.
That's not going to work very well.
Nope. Our plans are incompatible.
So we don't really share an intention to paint the house together, even if we both say we do.
Right. Bratman says that for a shared intention to exist, each participant has to intend for their individual subplans to mesh.
Meaning they have to be compatible and work together smoothly.
Precisely. Your plan has to allow space for my plan and mine for yours.
But it's not enough if they just happen to mesh by accident, right?
Yeah. You're sharp. Bratman recognizes that. He adds another condition: intention to mesh subplans.
So we have to be actively committed to making sure our plans stay compatible.
Exactly. And we need to be ready to coordinate if things change or if problems come up.
It's not just about having compatible plans. It's about wanting to keep them compatible.
Absolutely. And philosopher Abraham Roth points out that this involves a kind of rational requirement.
Rational requirement.
Yeah. He calls it practical intersubjectivity. Basically, it means we have to treat each other's intentions and plans as important.
We can't just ignore them or bulldoze through them.
Nope. We have to take them into account when we make our own decisions.
So shared activity involves this back and forth, this constant awareness of the other person's intentions.
Precisely. Now, Bratman being Bratman, he wants to give a reductive explanation for this.
A reductive explanation, meaning he wants to explain it in terms of individual intentions and beliefs.
Right. He suggests that it comes from the norms that govern individual intentions.
Norms like consistency and means-end coherence.
Exactly. Those are the ones. And he brings in this thing called a bridge intention.
A bridge intention. What's that?
It's basically an intention to act in line with the other person's intentions.
So like, I intend to do my part, but also to do it in a way that fits with your intentions.
You got it. Bratman argues this bridge intention links individual and shared activity.
So the norms of individual rationality carry over into the shared context.
Precisely. But Roth, while he agrees that these interpersonal norms are real, he's not convinced by Bratman's reductive account.
He thinks there's something more to it.
Yeah, Roth argues there's something inherently social about these norms, something you can't just reduce to individual intentions.
That makes sense. It feels like shared activity has its own unique logic.
Exactly. Now, all this talk about meshing plans brings up another question.
Which is,
do our reasons for participating need to be shared as well?
Interesting question. Like, can we have a shared intention even if we have different reasons for wanting to do it?
That's it. Philosophers like Korsgaard and Tuomela think shared reasons might be important.
So not just coordinating our plans, but also having some agreement on why we're doing it in the first place.
Exactly. Korsgaard even talks about participants treating each other's reasons as their own.
I wonder how that works in practice. I mean, people cooperate all the time, even when their ultimate goals are different.
You're right. Think about rival political parties. They might support the same policy for totally different reasons.
Exactly. So it seems like you can have shared activity even with some divergence in motives.
That seems to be the case. But there are probably limits if someone's motives are totally manipulative or aimed at undermining the group.
Yeah, that wouldn't really count as genuine shared activity.
Right. So we've talked about how participatory intentions relate in terms of content and planning, but what about how they are formed and how they change over time?
Yeah, that's a good point. How do we go from separate intentions to a shared one?
Margaret Gilbert has a really interesting theory about this. She focuses on this idea of joint commitment.
Joint commitment.
Yeah. She says that a shared activity starts when people openly express their willingness to be committed to it together.
So like a public declaration of we're in this together.
Exactly. It's a social process. And Gilbert also has a strong view on how shared intentions can be dissolved or changed.
Oh. What's her take on that?
She thinks it requires the agreement of all participants.
So I can't just decide on my own to back out of a shared activity.
According to Gilbert, no. She calls this the concurrence condition. It's a pretty strict rule.
It does seem a bit rigid. What if circumstances change for one person?
That's a common objection. What if someone's situation changes and they can't participate anymore?
Or what if someone just stops responding or contributing?
These are all good points. While many philosophers like Gilbert's emphasis on the social nature of shared intentions.
Yeah, the idea that it's created and sustained through interaction and mutual acknowledgement.
Right. But this concurrence condition has been challenged. Some propose weaker versions, allowing withdrawal in certain cases.
So a bit more flexibility.
Exactly. Stroud, for example, suggests a weaker normative condition.
Okay, what's that?
He says that participating in a shared activity gives you a special moral prerogative.
That prerogative.
Yeah, like a kind of moral permission to act in ways that might override obligations to people outside the group.
So participation in the shared activity changes your moral landscape in a way.
Exactly. So we've spent a lot of time talking about individual intentions, even if they're directed towards collective action. But we touched on this earlier, this idea that a group itself can act as an agent.
Right. The group mind idea.
Exactly. While most of the discussion focuses on individual intentions, some philosophers take this idea seriously.
Like they think groups can have their own intentions and act on them.
Yes. They argue that under certain conditions, a group can become a genuine agent with a mind of its own.
That sounds pretty radical. Who are these philosophers?
Philip Pettit and Jennifer Lackey are two big names in this area. They're not afraid to push the boundaries.
So how do they argue for this group agency?
Well, Pettit focuses on the idea of rational integration.
Rational integration, what does that mean?
Basically, it means that a group's actions and beliefs make sense together.
Like they're consistent and can be explained in terms of goals and reasoning.
Exactly. If a group shows this kind of rationality, Pettit says it's reasonable to see it as a genuine agent.
So it's not just the individuals acting in a coordinated way, it's the group itself acting as a unified whole.
Precisely. And he argues this is even necessary to explain certain things, like if a corporation consistently acts to maximize profits.
You might say the corporation itself intends to maximize profits, even if no single person has that as their individual goal.
Exactly. But of course, there are counter-arguments. Some philosophers say, hold on, can't we explain all this in terms of individual intentions?
Like, maybe the corporation's profit-seeking behavior is just the result of individual executives and employees all acting to advance their own careers.
That's the challenge. Can we explain everything at the individual level?
So how does Pettit respond to that?
He points to cases where a group arrives at a decision that no individual member would have made on their own.
You mean like a group making a decision that goes against the majority vote?
Even more interesting than that, he talks about these discursive dilemmas.
Okay, I need an example. What's a discursive dilemma?
Imagine a committee voting on whether to hire someone. They have two criteria: qualifications and references.
Okay.
The committee votes on each criterion separately, and a majority supports both the candidate's qualifications and their references.
So logically, they should hire the candidate, right?
You'd think so. But here's the twist. If you ask each member to vote directly on whether to hire the candidate, based on their own overall judgment.
A majority might actually vote against hiring.
Exactly. The group's decision, based on a rational procedure, can conflict with the individual judgments of most members.
Wow, that's mind-boggling. So it's like the group is reasoning in a way that's different from any of its individual members.
That's Pettit's point. He sees these cases as evidence for genuine group agency.
But I'm sure there are objections to this, too.
Oh, absolutely. Some argue that even these discursive dilemmas can be explained without resorting to a group mind.
Like maybe it's just a matter of individuals designing and implementing these procedures with group-level goals in mind.
Exactly. So the debate goes on. Is there something truly unique about group reasoning? Or is it ultimately reducible to individual intentions?
That seems to be the central question. Is the group's mind something over and above the individuals, or is it just a reflection of their combined efforts?
Right. And Patricia Churchland, another philosopher, adds an interesting layer to this. She suggests that a true group mind might require a special kind of awareness.
Awareness of what?
Awareness of the group itself. She calls it plural self-awareness. It's like a shared sense of us that goes beyond just being aware of the other individuals in the group.
So it's not just knowing that the others are there, it's having a sense of the group as a single entity.
Precisely. It's a fascinating idea, and it shows how complex this issue of group agency really is.
It is. We started with this simple question of, what does it mean to act together? And look where we ended up. Intentions, plans, norms, obligations, even group minds.
It's quite a journey, and for you as a philosopher, it's important to see the depth and complexity of these debates.
Absolutely. It's not just armchair philosophy either.
Yeah.
This stuff has real implications for how we understand the world.
You said it. It affects how we think about responsibility, social institutions, ethics, even politics.
So many different areas are touched by these ideas.
It's a truly interdisciplinary topic, and it helps us understand the human condition in a deeper way.
I completely agree. So as we wrap up, here's something for all the philosophers listening to ponder. We've talked about the challenges of understanding shared agency, even in relatively simple cases.
Right.
But what about those huge global issues like climate change or social injustice?
Those are massive collective action problems.
Exactly. The lines of responsibility are so blurred. Individual intentions get lost in the mix.
It's hard to even say who's acting and who's not.
Right. So, given everything we've discussed about shared agency, how do we even begin to think about responsibility in these cases?
That's the real challenge, isn't it? How do we apply these philosophical concepts to these real-world problems? It's something we all need to grapple with.
It really is. And it shows how relevant and important philosophy can be for understanding the world around us.